The airport buzzed with the usual chaos. Passengers rushing to their gates, announcements echoing overhead, and the rhythmic beeping of luggage carts filling the space. Amid the commotion, a woman in a crisp blue uniform strutted through the terminal, her polished heels clicking against the floor. Amelia Carter, a senior flight attendant, was the embodiment of confidence. She had been flying for years, and with her experience came a sense of authority. Sometimes, a little too much of it. She adjusted her perfectly pinned hair and straightened the badge on her uniform. She took pride in her job, but she also had a reputation. One that whispered through the corridors of every airport she passed through. She was known for her sharp tongue, her impatience with those she deemed beneath her, and her belief that her status placed her above others. That day, she was in a particularly sour mood. A delayed flight, an uncooperative passenger, and a less-than-perfect hotel stay had already tested her patience. As she made her way to the first-class lounge, she noticed something that made her stop. A woman, dressed in simple clothes, adjusting a tray of refreshments on the lounge counter. Her uniform wasn't airline staff. It was the modest attire of a housemaid. Something about the sight irked Amelia. Maybe it was the way the woman moved so calmly while she, herself, was frustrated. Maybe it was the fact that the woman looked too comfortable in a space meant for high-status individuals. Whatever it was, Amelia didn't like it. "Hey you! What are you doing here?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to make heads turn. The woman, who had been carefully arranging a plate of sandwiches, looked up, startled. She had warm brown eyes and an air of quiet grace. Her name was Elena. "I work here," Elena responded politely, her voice gentle yet composed. "I was just making sure everything is set for the guests." Amelia scoffed. "You're a maid, not a server. Know your place." Elena blinked, taken aback by the unnecessary hostility. "I was only doing my job, ma'am." But Amelia wasn't listening. Maybe it was the exhaustion from back-to-back flights, maybe it was her own inflated ego, but she decided at that moment that Elena needed to be put in her place. "You're lucky they even let you step foot in this lounge," Amelia sneered. And then, before anyone could react, she did something shocking. She lifted her hand and slapped Elena across the face. A collective gasp rippled through the lounge. The sharp sound echoed in the stunned silence that followed. A few guests turned their heads, whispering among themselves. Some looked on in disbelief. Elena, however, didn't move. Her expression didn't crumble. Instead, she slowly lifted her hand to her cheek, where Amelia's palm had left a faint red mark. But what caught the most attention wasn't the slap itself. It was the way Elena looked at Amelia, not with anger or fear, but with something else. Something quiet. Something knowing. A moment later, the doors to the lounge swung open. A tall man stepped in, dressed in a tailored suit, his presence immediately commanding attention. He had the look of someone important, someone who didn't need to demand respect because it was naturally given to him. Amelia recognized him instantly. Everyone in the airline did. It was Adrian Lancaster, the billionaire owner of the very airline Amelia worked for. And as his gaze landed on Elena, a flicker of something unrecognizable crossed his face before he spoke, his voice calm yet deadly. "Elena," he said, walking straight to her, his tone filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Amelia's breath hitched. The way he said her name, it wasn't distant or formal. It wasn't the way a CEO would address an employee. It was personal. It was intimate. Then, Elena turned to him and did something that made Amelia's world tilt off its axis. She smiled softly and reached for his hand. "Darling," Elena murmured, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 secrets. And just like that, Amelia felt the ground beneath her shatter. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. Her mind struggled to process what had just happened. Darling, did she hear that right? No, it had to be a mistake. Maybe Elena was just trying to save herself by pretending to know the CEO. That had to be it. There was no way, This simple housemaid was connected to someone as powerful as Adrian Lancaster. But as she watched Adrian gently take Elena's hand, his thumb brushing over the faint mark on her cheek, Amelia's stomach twisted. His eyes, usually unreadable in board meetings and airline events, were now filled with something unexpected: concern, affection, and an unmistakable familiarity. "Elena," Adrian said again, his voice softer this time. "Who did this?" The room was dead silent. Everyone's eyes darted between the three of them, sensing that something bigger was unfolding. Amelia felt the weight of every glance. She took an unsteady step back, her confidence slipping away like sand through her fingers. Elena, still holding Adrian's hand, didn't answer immediately. She glanced at Amelia, her expression unreadable. But she didn't accuse her outright. She didn't even point a finger. Instead, she let out a quiet breath and said, "It's all right. I don't want to cause a scene." But it was too late for that. Adrian's jaw tightened. He wasn't a man who needed to raise his voice to be intimidating. His mere presence demanded authority, and right now, his silence was louder than any outburst. He studied Elena's face for a moment longer before turning his attention to Amelia. His gaze was sharp, piercing. "You," he said simply. Amelia swallowed hard. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. There was no way out of this. She had to say something. I didn't know," she stammered, her usual composure crumbling. "I thought she was just a—" She stopped herself too late. "Just a what?" Adrian's voice was dangerously low. Amelia felt heat rush to her face. How could this be happening? Just minutes ago, she was the one in control, the one setting the rules. Now, she was standing in front of the most powerful man in the airline, fumbling for words like a guilty child. "I misunderstood the situation," she blurted, forcing a nervous smile. "I thought she was someone else. I would never." Adrian didn't let her finish. "She's my wife." The words hit Amelia like a brick. Her ears rang. Her breath caught in her throat. No, this couldn't be happening. The whispers in the lounge turned into full conversations. People leaned closer, exchanging stunned glances. A few even pulled out their phones, subtly recording the scene. Amelia felt her legs weaken. Elena, a housemaid, married to Adrian Lancaster? It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Her eyes darted back to Elena, searching for something. Anything that would tell her this was a joke, a misunderstanding. But Elena's face remained calm. She wasn't smug, wasn't gloating. She just looked at Adrian with quiet trust, as if his presence alone was enough. And that made it worse. Because this wasn't a joke. Adrian let out a slow breath, his hand still holding Elena's. "We'll talk about this later," he said to her gently, before looking back at Amelia. "For now, I'd like a word with Miss Carter." Amelia's heart dropped. She opened her mouth, ready to protest, to beg, to explain. But Adrian was already walking toward a private meeting room, expecting her to follow. The weight of 100 stairs burned into her back as she forced herself to move, each step feeling heavier than the last. Elena watched them go, her expression still unreadable. But as Amelia glanced back one last time, she swore she saw something in Elena's eyes. Not revenge, not anger, but something far worse. Pity. The door to the private meeting room shut with a quiet click, sealing Amelia inside with Adrian. The air felt heavier in the enclosed space, and the silence between them was unbearable. She stood stiffly, her fingers clutching the hem of her uniform as she tried to steady her breathing. Adrian leaned against the polished conference table, arms crossed, his gaze locked onto her. His expression wasn't angry, at least, not in the way Amelia expected. It was worse. It was disappointment. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice calm, almost too calm. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Amelia forced herself to meet his eyes. Sir, I— No excuses, Adrian interrupted, his tone sharp. You humiliated my wife. You disrespected her without knowing anything about her. And you did it in front of my employees, my clients. He exhaled, shaking his head. You think that's acceptable behavior? Amelia's pulse pounded in her ears. She had been a senior flight attendant for years, had dealt with difficult passengers, managed entire crews, and handled stressful situations. But standing here, facing Adrian Lancaster's quiet fury, she felt smaller than ever. I didn't know who she was, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I thought she was just a— She stopped again. The words felt wrong now. Just a housemaid? The truth hit her in a way it hadn't before. She had judged Elena in an instant, based only on her appearance, based only on an assumption. She had acted without thinking, without considering that the woman she dismissed so easily had a life beyond what she could see. Adrian studied her carefully, his eyes filled with something unreadable. And that makes it okay? No, sir, she said quickly. I was out of line. A long silence followed. Then, Adrian let out a slow breath. You've been with this airline a long time, Amelia. I know your reputation. Her stomach twisted. You're good at your job, he admitted. But you've also been warned before. Amelia's mouth went dry. He knew. Of course he did. There had been complaints. Passengers who felt she was too condescending, junior staff who thought she was too harsh. But she had always dismissed it, always thought that her experience and efficiency outweighed any personal grievances. Now, she wasn't so sure. Adrian's voice softened, but it didn't lose its edge. This isn't just about today. It's about the kind of person you choose to be. He straightened, adjusting the cuff of his expensive suit. Elena didn't tell me what happened. She didn't demand punishment. She didn't need to. Amelia frowned slightly. She didn't? Adrian shook his head. That's not who she is. But that doesn't change the fact that I saw it with my own eyes. A strange feeling settled in Amelia's chest. She had expected Elena to be furious, to demand justice, to seek revenge. But she had done none of that. She had simply walked away. Somehow that made it worse. Adrian exhaled, glancing at the clock. I have meetings to attend. We'll discuss your future with this company soon. The word sent a chill down Amelia's spine. Future? That sounded like a decision hadn't been made yet. But it was clear that whatever came next, it wouldn't be on her terms. She opened her mouth to speak, to plead, but Adrian had already turned away. The conversation was over. As Amelia stepped out of the room, her legs felt unsteady. The lounge was quieter now, but she could still feel lingering stares. Staff members avoided her gaze. A few passengers whispered among themselves. Her eyes searched for Elena, but she was gone. A strange emptiness filled her chest. For the first time in a long time, Amelia Carter didn't feel powerful. She felt lost. Amelia moved through the airport like a ghost, her mind racing. The weight of what had happened clung to her, refusing to let go. She had spent years carving out a place for herself in the airline industry, perfecting the image of a respected, authoritative flight attendant. Now, in a matter of minutes, everything she had built felt like it was slipping through her fingers. She reached the staff lounge, her hands trembling as she poured herself a cup of coffee. The murmur of voices around her felt distant, like she was hearing them through a thick fog. She could feel the stares, the hushed whispers. They all knew. News like this traveled fast. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from her closest friend in the airline, Claire. What happened? People are saying you got called in by the boss himself? Amelia swallowed hard, her fingers hovering over the screen. She could barely form a response. Before she could type anything, another voice pulled her out of her daze. You okay? She looked up to see Ryan, a fellow flight attendant she had worked with on several flights. He was younger, but sharp. He had always been friendly, though Amelia had kept her distance, preferring not to get too close to her colleagues. "I'm fine," she said quickly, taking a sip of coffee to mask the shake in her hands. Ryan didn't look convinced. He leaned against the counter, lowering his voice. "People are talking, you know." Amelia sighed. "I figured." He hesitated before speaking again. "Did you really slap the CEO's wife?" The way he said it made it sound even worse. Amelia clenched the cup tighter, feeling a wave of regret crash over her. "I didn't know she was his wife," she muttered. Ryan exhaled, shaking his head. "Still, that's rough." He glanced around the room before lowering his voice even further. "Listen, I don't think Adrian is the type to fire someone over one mistake. But this isn't just about the slap, is it?" Amelia's chest tightened. She knew what he meant. Her attitude, her reputation, the way she carried herself like she was untouchable. And now, she wasn't. Before she could respond, a call came over the intercom. "Senior Flight Attendant Amelia Carter, please report to the executive office immediately." The room fell into silence. Everyone heard it. Amelia felt her stomach drop. This was it. She placed her untouched coffee on the counter and walked out, her heart hammering with every step. The executive offices were on the upper level of the airport, far removed from the usual bustle of passengers and crew. As she reached the door, she hesitated for the first time in a long time. She had walked into countless meetings before, confident and in control. But now, she wasn't sure what was waiting for her on the other side. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. "Come in," came a voice from inside. She pushed the door open, stepping into the large office. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the runway, planes taking off into the sky. But Amelia's focus was locked on the two people in the room. Adrian Lancaster sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable. And across from him, seated calmly with her hands folded in her lap, Elena. Amelia's pulse quickened. Elena turned to face her, and for the first time since the incident, Amelia saw something unexpected in her expression. There was no anger, no resentment, just a quiet understanding. "Sit down, Miss Carter," Adrian said. Amelia obeyed, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Then, Elena finally broke it. "I asked my husband not to fire you." Amelia's breath caught. She hadn't expected that. Adrian remained silent, watching the exchange. Elena continued, her voice steady but firm. "I don't believe in ruining someone's career over one mistake. But I do believe in accountability." Amelia swallowed hard. She hesitated. Apologizing had never been something she did easily. But right now, she knew there was no other option. "I'm sorry," she said, the words feeling heavier than she expected. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you that way." Elena held her gaze. "Why did you?" Amelia opened her mouth, but the truth was harder to admit. She had spent years justifying her behavior, telling herself that being strict meant being professional, that demanding respect meant keeping control. But the reality was, she had judged Elena based on nothing more than her own assumptions. "I don't know," Amelia admitted quietly. Elena studied her for a moment before nodding. "Then maybe it's time you figure it out." The words hung in the air, cutting deeper than any punishment. Adrian finally spoke, his voice measured. "I haven't made my decision yet, Miss Carter. But I will soon." Amelia's heart pounded. There was nothing more to say. She stood slowly, glancing at Elena one last time. And for the first time, Amelia didn't see a housemaid. She didn't see the woman she had underestimated. She saw someone stronger than she had ever given credit for. And she wasn't sure what scared her more, the thought of losing her job or the realization of what that said about her. Amelia walked out of the executive office, her mind spinning. Every step felt heavier, as if the weight of her actions was finally catching up to her. She had expected anger from Elena, expected Adrian to deliver immediate consequences. Instead, Elena's words clung to her like a shadow. Then maybe it's time you figure it out. It was supposed to be a reprimand, but it felt like something else, like a mirror forcing Amelia to see herself for the first time. And she wasn't sure she liked what she saw. As she made her way through the terminal, the usual confidence in her stride was gone. The whispers, the glances, she felt them all. The news had spread like wildfire. But right now, that was the least of her concerns. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Claire. "Hey, you should see this." Amelia frowned, quickly opening the link Claire had sent. It led to a news site, and the headline made her blood run cold. Mystery woman spotted with CEO Adrian Lancaster. Secret relationship revealed? Her breath caught as she scrolled down, her heart pounding. The article was filled with blurry photos taken at the airport lounge. Photos of Elena standing beside Adrian, holding his hand. The captions twisted the narrative, making it seem like Elena wasn't his wife but someone else entirely. Amelia's stomach turned. The article didn't just stop at speculation. It had gone further, digging up Elena's past, or at least, what little they could find. They described her as a mystery woman, someone with no known connections to Adrian before now. No social media presence, no public records linking her to high society. The article practically questioned whether Elena was really who she claimed to be. And the worst part? The comment section was already filled with harsh words. People speculating, tearing her apart. Some doubted Adrian's choice in a partner. Others questioned Elena's past, making wild accusations. Amelia's fingers tightened around her phone. She had caused this. If she hadn't humiliated Elena in front of so many people, if she hadn't let her ego get in the way, none of this would have spiraled out of control. The guilt settled in her chest like a weight. And then, another realization hit her. Adrian and Elena didn't know about this yet. She turned sharply, her instincts kicking in. There was still time. Maybe she could fix this before it got worse. Amelia rushed back toward the executive offices, weaving through the terminal as fast as she could without drawing more attention. Her heart pounded as she reached Adrian's door again, hesitating only a second before knocking. This time, it was Elena who answered. She looked surprised to see Amelia standing there, slightly breathless, but she didn't say anything. Amelia swallowed hard. "I need to talk to both of you. Now." Elena frowned slightly but stepped aside, allowing her in. Adrian was still seated at his desk, looking up with mild impatience. Amelia didn't waste time. She placed her phone on the desk, the article still open. "You need to see this." Elena leaned in first, her expression unreadable as her eyes scanned the screen. Adrian, however, went completely still. A heavy silence filled the room. Elena slowly exhaled, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk. But she didn't say anything. Adrian's expression darkened as he picked up the phone, scrolling through the article. "Who leaked this?" His voice was dangerously low. Amelia shook her head. "I don't know, but it's spreading fast." Elena finally spoke, her voice calm but laced with something Amelia couldn't quite place. "So, they think I'm not really your wife." Adrian clenched his jaw. "They don't know anything." But the damage had already begun. And the worst part? Amelia had a sinking feeling that someone had leaked this intentionally. Adrian's grip on the phone tightened as he scrolled through the article again, his expression dark. The room felt colder, tension thick in the air. Elena remained quiet, but her gaze sharpened, as if she was piecing together something unseen. Amelia stood frozen, waiting for a reaction. A part of her had expected anger, maybe even panic. But Elena's calm unsettled her more than anything. Then, Adrian let out a slow breath and placed the phone down. This wasn't random. Amelia frowned. What do you mean? Elena exchanged a look with Adrian before speaking. Someone wanted this to happen. Someone wanted to discredit me. The words sent a chill through Amelia. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the desk. Think about it. The timing. The way the article was written. They didn't just report on a rumor. They planted doubts. They questioned Elena's identity. That doesn't happen by accident. Amelia's mind raced. She had assumed the news had spread because of gossip, because of what had happened in the lounge. But what if it wasn't just whispers among staff? What if someone had fed the story to the media? Elena's voice was quiet but firm. There's only one person who had a reason to do this. Amelia's stomach twisted. Adrian's jaw tightened. Nathan. The name landed like a bomb. Amelia's breath hitched. She had heard of him, Nathan Caldwell, the airline COO. He was Adrian's second in command, but there had always been rumors of tension between them. Elena nodded. He's never approved of me. He thinks I don't belong in Adrian's life. He's been waiting for a moment like this. Amelia swallowed hard, guilt creeping in again. And I gave him exactly what he needed. Elena didn't say anything. But she didn't need to. Adrian stood abruptly, grabbing his phone. I'm handling this now. Before Amelia could react, he was already making a call, his voice sharp and commanding as he ordered his legal team to contain the situation. Elena turned to Amelia, her expression softer than before. This isn't just about an article. This is about control. Nathan wants to weaken Adrian, and I'm the easiest target. Amelia had spent years thinking she understood power, how to maintain it, how to demand respect. But for the first time, she saw it in a different way. Elena wasn't just some quiet woman standing in Adrian's shadow. She was fighting a battle most people didn't even see. And Amelia had played right into the enemy's hands. I want to fix this, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena studied her for a moment before nodding. Then start by being better than the person who made this mess. The words hit Amelia deep. A sudden knock at the door interrupted them. A staff member peeked inside, looking hesitant. Sir, Mr. Caldwell is here to see you. Adrian's expression darkened. Elena straightened. And Amelia realized this wasn't over yet. Adrian's expression hardened as he set his phone down. The room felt colder now, charged with something unspoken. Elena's posture remained poised, but there was a quiet intensity in her eyes. Amelia could feel the shift in the air. Whatever was about to happen would change everything. The door opened, and Nathan Caldwell stepped inside. He was a tall man, sharp-featured, with a kind of confidence that came from years of wielding power. But there was something else beneath the surface, something calculating. His gaze flickered briefly to Amelia before settling on Adrian. I hear there's quite the situation, Nathan said, his voice smooth, almost amused. Adrian didn't blink. You would know. Nathan let out a small chuckle. Now, let's not jump to conclusions. The media gets a hold of things all the time. You can't blame me for that. Elena spoke before Adrian could. You planted this, Nathan. You wanted people to question who I am, to make it seem like Adrian is hiding something. Nathan tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words. That's an interesting theory. His tone was casual, but Amelia caught the flicker of satisfaction in his expression. Adrian took a step forward, his voice controlled but edged with steel. You've wanted me out of my own company for years. You think making Elena look bad will weaken me. But you underestimated both of us. Nathan's smile faded just slightly. Amelia watched the exchange in silence, her heart pounding. She had spent years believing that control was everything, keeping herself above others, ensuring that no one questioned her authority. But standing in this room, witnessing this battle of power, she saw what real strength looked like. It wasn't about dominance. It was about resilience. Elena didn't need to raise her voice to hold her ground. Adrian didn't need to shout to make his presence known. They stood firm, unshaken, because they knew who they were. Nathan exhaled, shaking his head. Believe what you want, but the damage is done. People are already talking. And in this world, perception is everything. Amelia's hands curled into fists at her sides. For the first time, she wasn't just a spectator in this game. She was part of the reason this had escalated, and she refused to let it end like this. Before she could second-guess herself, she stepped forward. Actually, perception can change. Nathan turned to her, raising an eyebrow. Oh, and what exactly do you know about that? Amelia lifted her chin. I know that I made a mistake. And I know that when you own up to something, when you set the record straight, people listen. Nathan smirked. So what? You're going to tell the world that you mistreated Adrian's wife? That you judged someone without knowing the full story? Amelia didn't flinch. Yes. The room went silent. Even Adrian and Elena looked at her with surprise. But Amelia knew this was the only way. She had spent too long protecting an image that wasn't worth protecting. The real power was in telling the truth. She turned to Adrian. Let me go public. Let me explain what happened, take responsibility. Not just to clear Elena's name, but because it's the right thing to do. Elena studied her for a long moment. Then, a small, knowing smile touched her lips. Adrian nodded. Do it. Nathan's smirk wavered. And for the first time, Amelia saw something in his eyes. Something close to frustration. He had expected a scandal. He had expected them to panic. But he hadn't expected them to fight back together. Without another word, Nathan turned and walked out, his footsteps sharp against the floor. Amelia let out a slow breath. The weight on her chest finally began to lift. Within hours, the damage control was in motion. Amelia recorded a statement, raw and honest, acknowledging her mistake and setting the record straight about Elena. The airline released an official statement confirming Elena's identity as Adrian's wife, shutting down the rumors. And just like that, the story shifted. But for Amelia, the biggest change wasn't in the media. It was in herself. Days later, as she walked through the airport, she felt the difference. The whispers had died down, replaced with nods of acknowledgement. She wasn't untouchable anymore. And strangely, she didn't want to be. She spotted Elena near the VIP lounge, speaking with a staff member. For a moment, Amelia hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she approached. Elena turned, her expression unreadable. Amelia met her gaze. Thank you. For not letting me off the hook, but also for giving me a chance to be better. Elena studied her, then gave a small nod. It takes strength to own your mistakes. Most people never do. Amelia exhaled, feeling something unfamiliar, something like relief. As she walked away, she realized that for the first time in a long time, she wasn't just trying to hold on to control. She was learning to let go, and it felt freeing.